Joining us now is Richard Tofel, the president of ProPublica since 2013. Prior to that, he served as the general manager of ProPublica from its founding in the late 2007. ProPublica is a groundbreaking, nonprofit, independent newsroom. It includes a team of 100 journalists who focus on bringing to the public stories that create real impact. And if recognitions and awards are an indication for success, then the 6 Pulitzer Prizes ProPublica have won over the years alongside other tens of prestigious awards proves it. He's also a member of Shomrim Advisory Committee, and we're thankful for him for that. Thank you very much, Richard, for making the time to have this conversation and joining us from New York.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
So, Richard, if you could take us back to the first days of ProPublica. Why do you think that's what the media needed? Or was it America maybe that needed something in 2007? And when you look at the media back then, did you feel something was missing? Can you say what that was? What was the need that ProPublica was trying to meet?
Sure. The need that we were trying to meet was a real beginning of a market failure, especially in investigative journalism, which is what we do, accountability journalism. Ironically, in this country, in the U.S., the best year in the history of the American newspaper business was the year 2000. But by 2005, as consumer broadband rolled out in America, the economics of newspapers began to collapse and has been, unfortunately, downhill ever since. And one of the consequences of that became apparent very quickly was cutbacks in investigative journalism almost across the board, with just a very few exceptions. And so ProPublica is designed to help fill that gap in investigative journalism on a nonprofit basis, originally at the national level, and then in more recent years, also at the local and regional level around the country.
And how did it begin? How did it come to be? Because it's so unique in its structure. What was the first person you met, or the first person that joined you in bringing this to life?
So we were enormously fortunate. ProPublica was in many ways the idea of 2 philanthropists, a married couple named Herb and Marion Sandler from San Francisco, who had built a very successful bank, which they sold in 2006 for a great deal of money. And they had been active philanthropists before that, but once they sold the bank, they decided to spend the rest of their lives, and did spend the rest of their lives as full-time philanthropists. And one of the most important initiatives they wanted to do was in investigative journalism. They went around this country and talked to a number of people about what they might do. Those included Paul Steiger, who was then the managing editor of the Wall Street Journal, someone with whom I had worked, and his vision was that we could create a nonprofit newsroom, publishing digitally and sharing our biggest stories with leading news organizations, which would publish them in partnership with us, thus enabling us to get audience very quickly. And the Sandlers committed up to $10 million a year for 3 years to give us the ability to start going. And so we did, and began publishing in mid-2008.
So like you say, ProPublica is an investigative journalism organization. It has several unique aspects. One of them is being nonprofit, relying on donations rather than on advertisement. And so how do you ensure financial stability? Is there a difference between a media company that is for-profit than one that is nonprofit? And how does that change the news environment, being nonprofit?
Yeah, I'm not sure it changes the approach to the news. I mean, good news organizations need to be, and I hope are, independent of their funding sources. With nonprofit, you are looking to donors, and 98% or more of our revenues from that day to this come from donors. At this point, the the Sandler Foundation is still a very important donor, but it's now, I guess, about 8% of funding, something like that, down from almost all of it at the beginning. And we had 43,000 donors last year. So but you need to be independent of your donors, just the way traditional media needed to be and needs still to be independent of advertisers.
Yeah, definitely. ProPublica is also a role model, I think, for an organization that operates in transparency. And it's really important for me to hear why is it important for you. And developing unique tools like the data store or opening databases. Tell us more about these tools. And this is not what an ordinary media organization does. Why do you do it? Why is it important for you not only to do investigative journalism story, but do something that's broader, that can be more helpful for journalists, even if they don't come from ProPublica?
Right. Well, I think one of the things is if you are operating as a nonprofit, that means you're being given some advantages, especially in the U.S. Contributions from Americans are tax deductible, which is a big advantage and helps nonprofits here raise a lot of their money. And in that public spirit, we try to operate really under a culture of sharing. So for instance, almost all of our stories are available for free republication by anyone under a Creative Commons license. And as you say, we've, from the beginning, put an emphasis on doing data journalism that not only can tell important stories, but can facilitate others doing those stories. So for instance, early on, we launched something called Dollars for Docs, which well before it became a similar effort was done by the federal government in this country, revealed all pharmaceutical company payments to doctors. And we did some interesting stories off of that database, but we also made it possible for people to search for their own doctor. And that in turn, if you limit a search to a particular locale, can help other news organizations do local stories about the doctors in their community who get the most money from pharmaceutical payments. And we've had similar approaches to stories in education or about nursing homes. And we've also launched in more recent years an effort that allows you to look at the filings, the public filings of all nonprofits across the country for free. So all these things are an attempt to take advantage of what transparency is possible, especially in digital media. And of course, we try to operate very transparently ourselves. We issue 3 public reports a year on our activities. We list the impact our stories have had, which is the most important measure to us of our own success. And we reveal our donors and our finances and our traffic. And so we try to operate a transparent business, just as we're asking others to be transparent with us about their activities.
That's really inspiring. We're getting close to the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you about now. You recently announced that you are leaving your position as the president of ProPublica, and are you a bit more optimistic now than you were in 2007, maybe hopeful? And looking back at the years of ProPublica, and I know you put a lot of emphasis about impact and measuring the impact of your important work. How did your organization change journalism?
So I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. We have made a difference. I mean, from changing various policies and laws and reporting resulting in the replacement of public officials who needed to be replaced. We've also grown quite a lot. So we started with a target budget of $10 million a year and about 20 or 25 people. We're now up to 175 people, and our budget this year is about $35 million. I am more optimistic about the role that nonprofit journalism can play. I still think that there are enormous challenges to journalism throughout the world as the advertising model continues to collapse and especially to be monopolized by just a few players. But I think we are making some progress. For myself, I will have been at this job 14 years by the time I retire later this year, and my feeling is if you stay in a job long enough, eventually you will have stayed too long, and I hope I've been able to avoid that.
I want to thank you very much. Your work and the work of ProPublica are really inspiring for us, and I want to thank you for your time, and we'll be in touch.
I just want to say before I go that the same is true of your work, and I'm very, very proud to be affiliated with it. I think you're doing very important things. I wish you all good fortune. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much.